They didn't recognize her, not as she stepped through the gleaming glass doors of the empire she'd built, not as her sneakers crossed the Italian marble floor that bore her name, not as she stood, calm and composed, in front of a showroom that owed its very existence to her grit. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made this moment so dangerous. Because Naomi Caldwell wasn't here to be seen, she was here to see. From the outside, Caldwell Motors was the very definition of luxury. Sharp lines, sculpted chrome, soft leather interiors bathed in natural light. It was a brand that stood for power, precision, prestige, and for Naomi, it had always stood for something else too. Access. The radical idea that luxury didn't belong to one kind of face, one kind of family, one kind of history. She'd fought her way into an industry that never made space for her. A black woman who hadn't inherited wealth, didn't carry a legacy name, and had never been invited to the table, so she built her own. With bruised knuckles, quiet brilliance, and a spine forged in fire, she built Caldwell Motors from zero to global. And now? Now she was sitting in silence, watching it all rot from the inside. It started with a letter. Handwritten, elegant cursive, the kind of thing people rarely send anymore. The words were polite, controlled, but every line dripped with disappointment and something sharper. A customer had walked into her Beverly Hills showroom, wealthy, ready to buy, admired the brand. But instead of red carpet treatment, he got suspicion, subtle distance, smiles without substance. And when a white customer walked in behind him, dressed no differently, that red carpet rolled out instantly. Test drives, champagne, the full royal treatment. The customer's name was David Williams. And while Naomi had never met him, his experience cut deeper than any public scandal ever could. Because she hadn't built Caldwell Motors to become just another gatekeeping fortress for the elite. She'd built it to disrupt, to democratize, to dare. But the moment Naomi read that letter, she knew. Somewhere, the mission had been lost. So she booked a flight. No press, no security, no headlines. Just her. Just a woman walking into her own kingdom to see how they'd treat her when they thought she was no one. And what happened next? They turned her away. They looked her in the eye and decided she didn't belong, not because of her bank account, not because of her clothes, because of her skin. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, is that in that moment they didn't just offend a customer. They declared war on their own queen, and Naomi Caldwell, she doesn't lose wars. This is not just a story about luxury cars. This is about power, prejudice, and the price of silence. Welcome to the war they never saw coming. Welcome to Naomi Caldwell, the CEO who went undercover to burn the system down. Naomi Caldwell stepped off the plane at LAX, the California sun casting a golden hue over the tarmac. She wore a simple navy blue blazer, khaki slacks, and comfortable flats, attire that screamed middle management rather than CEO. Her natural curls were pulled back into a low bun, and a pair of modest pearl earrings adorned her ears. She carried a worn leather tote, the kind that had seen countless boardrooms and coffee shops. To the casual observer, she was just another businesswoman on a trip, perhaps looking to purchase a vehicle or explore dealership options. The Beverly Hills showroom of Caldwell Motors stood as a testament to luxury and success. Glass walls showcased gleaming vehicles, each positioned meticulously under soft lighting. The entrance boasted polished marble floors, and the scent of fresh leather wafted through the air. Naomi approached the reception desk, where a young woman glanced up, offering a rehearsed smile. "Good afternoon," Naomi began, her voice steady. "I'm interested in exploring some of your models." The receptionist's smile faltered for a brief moment before she responded. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Naomi replied, "but I was hoping to speak with a sales representative." The receptionist hesitated, her eyes scanning Naomi's attire. "Let me check," she said, picking up the phone. Moments later, a tall man with salt and pepper hair approached. He wore a tailored suit, and his polished demeanor exuded confidence. I'm Richard Langford, the showroom manager. How can I assist you? Naomi extended her hand. Naomi Caldwell, I'm interested in your latest models. Richard's handshake was firm but brief. Of course. However, our sales team is currently occupied. Perhaps you could schedule an appointment. For another day? Naomi raised an eyebrow. I was hoping to browse today. Is that not possible? Richard offered a tight-lipped smile. We prioritize clients with appointments, especially during peak hours. It's company policy. Naomi glanced around the showroom. A young white couple had just entered, greeted warmly by a sales associate who offered them beverages and began discussing vehicle features. I see, Naomi said, her tone neutral. Thank you for your time. As she turned to leave, she noticed a young woman watching the interaction from a distance. Their eyes met briefly before the woman looked away. Outside, Naomi found a nearby cafe, with a clear view of the dealership. She ordered a coffee and took a seat by the window, pulling out a notebook. From her vantage point, she observed the interactions within the showroom. White customers were greeted enthusiastically, offered refreshments, and given detailed tours. Customers of color, however, were met with curt nods, minimal engagement, and in some cases, subtle redirection. Naomi jotted down notes, documenting the disparities. She noted the body language, the duration of interactions, and the overall demeanor of the staff. Her observations painted a clear picture of systemic bias. Over the next few days, Naomi returned to the cafe, continuing her observations. She noticed the same patterns repeating. One afternoon, she saw the young woman from before stepping outside for a break. Seizing the opportunity, Naomi approached her. Excuse me, Naomi began. I couldn't help but notice your professionalism inside. May I ask your name? The woman looked surprised but replied, Maria Torres. Maria, I'm Naomi. I appreciate your dedication. It's evident in how you carry yourself. Maria hesitated, then said, Thank you. I try to treat everyone with respect. Naomi nodded. That's commendable. Not everyone shares that philosophy. Maria glanced back at the showroom. It's challenging. There are unspoken rules, expectations. Sometimes it's hard to navigate. I understand, Naomi said gently. If you ever need someone to talk to, here's my card. She handed Maria a business card with only her name and a phone number. Maria took it, her eyes lingering on the name. Thank you, Naomi. As Naomi walked away, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The discrimination she had witnessed wasn't due to incompetence. It was a calculated strategy. But now, with first-hand observations and a potential ally in Maria, she was ready to confront the systemic issues within her own company. From her seat in the cafe, Naomi watched the dealership, her reflection in the window merging with the bustling scene inside. The battle lines were drawn, and she was prepared to lead the charge for change. Naomi Caldwell sat at the edge of the hotel bed, the city of Los Angeles glowing like molten gold beyond the glass. Her eyes were trained on the recording in her hands. A handheld video of herself being denied access to the very car she'd built, a legacy around. A Bugatti Chiron Supersport, a marvel of engineering, a symbol of status, a product of her blood and vision, and she had been waved away from it like a nuisance. But that wasn't enough. She needed more than her word. She needed undeniable proof that the rot was not incidental. It was systemic. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in nearly a year. It rang twice. Naomi? Daniel Harper's voice was a mix of curiosity and urgency. I need your help, and I need someone else. Someone white. Daniel was silent for a beat. Then, what's the play? A test, she said. I want to see how they treat someone who fits their image of a serious buyer. Michael Reeves was a seasoned tech executive, white, early 40s, and charming in that unthreatening country club kind of way. Naomi met him once at a venture capital summit, and while they'd never been close, he owed her a favor, a big one. When Daniel called him, there was no hesitation. Let me get this straight, Michael said, sipping bourbon in Naomi's suite later that evening. You want me to walk into your dealership and pretend I want a Bugatti? Not pretend, Naomi corrected. Just act curious. Ask to see the model they told me was unavailable. Act natural. Daniel will be recording everything. And if they show me the car, then we have our proof. The next morning, Michael stepped out of a rented black Mercedes-Benz, tailored blazer hugging his frame, casual but clearly expensive loafers tapping the showroom's polished floor. He was greeted instantly. Smiles, handshakes, the offer of espresso. Mr. Reeves. Richard Langford himself emerged from his glass office like a shark drawn to blood. What brings you in today? Saw the Chiron from outside. Thought I'd take a peek, Michael said casually. Of course. Let me give you a personal tour. Richard beamed. Outside, Naomi watched from a parked car, Daniel beside her, holding the camera steady. 25 minutes later, Michael returned. They rolled out the red carpet, he said. Offered me a glass of champagne, private lounge. They even let me sit inside the car. Naomi nodded slowly. Now we make it official. The anonymous email arrived at Caldwell Motors' corporate inbox at 6:47 a.m. the next morning. Sent by a fabricated journalist alias from a shell business outlet, the message was precise. Subject: Inquiry regarding discriminatory practices at Caldwell Motors, Beverly Hills. The body of the email outlined alleged racial profiling at the showroom, hinting at video evidence and leaked internal documents. No accusations. Just questions. Just enough to ignite a fire. Naomi followed up the next day with another message, this time addressed directly to Jonathan Fields, a senior board member. Attached, a clip of Michael being ushered into the private lounge, a snapshot of Naomi being turned away. Her note was brief. Jonathan, if we don't get ahead of this, the fallout will be public. Regards, Naomi Caldwell. Richard Langford's phone rang mid-morning. It was corporate. We got a media inquiry. The voice on the other end barked. Something about racial profiling in your store. Richard's stomach dropped. Bullshit. Reporters love drama. Probably a prank. Well, it better be, because if this gets traction, the board will come down on you. Hard! He hung up and stormed out of his office. Maria! He barked. Maria Torres stood frozen. Yes, sir? My office. Now. Maria sat stiffly across from Richard, the glass walls of the office casting a cold glow. Tell me, Richard began. Have you been talking to anyone outside the company? Maria blinked. No, sir. He leaned in. Because someone is, and I'm going to find out who. She forced herself to breathe slowly. I just do my job. Richard studied her. Some people get soft, forget who they work for. We have a system for a reason. You follow it or you find another job. Maria nodded, then excused herself. Her hands trembled as she stepped into the break room. She dialed a number. Naomi answered on the first ring. He knows, Maria whispered. He doesn't have proof, but he suspects. Then we need to meet. Somewhere quiet. The cafe on West 3rd was nearly empty. Naomi sat in the back, a cup of untouched tea in front of her. When Maria arrived, her eyes were wide with fear, but there was resolve in her spine. I shouldn't be here, Maria whispered. But you are. They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then Maria said, It's real. Everything you suspect. The profiling, the rules, the system. It's not written down, but it's there. Richard enforces it. We're told to identify qualified customers within the first minute, and that means race and appearance. Naomi didn't blink. Have you seen emails, internal memos, anything that could prove it? Maria hesitated, then opened her bag. Inside, a flash drive. Emails, notes from meetings, even recordings. I copied them weeks ago. I didn't know why. Maybe because I was tired of pretending. Naomi took the drive. This changes everything. The next morning, Naomi sent the footage to the board, along with Maria's supporting evidence. The email subject line was simple. Subject, urgent, racial profiling evidence. Beverly Hills Showroom. She attached a second file, a formal request for an emergency board meeting. At the same time, Daniel launched Phase 2. The Whisper, another journalist email, another anonymous tip. By noon, Richard Langford was in full panic mode. "Delete everything," he told his managers. "Emails, chats, even meeting notes, clean it all up." He gathered the staff. "Nobody speaks to press. Nobody speaks to anyone. If I find out who's behind this, they're done." Maria sat silently in the back, her pulse racing. She had already spoken. And soon, the whole world would hear it. That evening, Naomi stood before her window, the city shimmering in the distance. She had the evidence. She had the ally. She had the board's attention. She picked up her phone. "Jonathan," she said, "we need to talk. If the company doesn't act, I will." Across town, Richard sat in a private lounge with 3 board members. "She wants to burn the whole thing down," he hissed. "She has evidence," one board member said. "Then, we discredit her," Richard replied. "We leak that she's using the scandal for a power grab. Make her the villain." They were quiet. "She's not just another exec," someone finally muttered. "Then treat her like a threat," Richard said coldly, "or she'll take us all down." The tipping point had been reached. The mask had fallen. Now, the war for truth and the soul of Caldwell Motors was fully underway. The silence before the storm is never really silent. It hums, it seethes, it gathers strength in hushed corners, behind closed doors, in boardroom whispers, and frantic late-night phone calls. Naomi Caldwell had felt that silence her whole career. But now, it was screaming. The first strike didn't come from Naomi. It came from Richard Langford's corner office late at night, bourbon in hand, pride wounded. The man who had once built his kingdom on charm and untraceable exclusion was cornered, and he wasn't about to go quietly. The next morning, the first headline dropped like poison ink spilled across parchment. "Is Naomi Caldwell exploiting a scandal for power?" It appeared on a fringe business blog, but the damage wasn't in the beeline. It was in the insinuation. A few anonymous sources, conveniently placed, suggested Naomi was leveraging the discrimination controversy not to clean house, but to consolidate her authority, gain more control over Caldwell Motors, and unseat key board members. Then came the bots. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The comments began flooding in, perfectly worded, eerily uniform. "Funny how she cares about racial equity now that her name was on the line. She's not fighting racism, she's just mad she wasn't recognized. This is a corporate coup hiding behind social justice." Even reputable outlets started to question the narrative. Business Insider ran a piece titled, "The Power Play Behind the Protests." CNBC asked, "Is Caldwell Motors facing a race reckoning or boardroom ambition?" Naomi watched it unfold like a slow-moving virus, eating into the very truth she'd fought to expose. Investors started calling, some supportive, many unsure. The board remained silent, strategic silence, the kind that signaled doubt. In her Manhattan office, Naomi sat behind her desk, hands steepled, phone buzzing with updates. Daniel stood nearby, his brow furrowed. "They're drowning out the message," he said. "Even the networks that backed us are starting to hedge their tone." Naomi didn't blink. "Then we remind them what this is really about." But even she, for one breathless night, wondered if the tide was too strong, until Maria went public. It started with a leak. Not just her name, but her voice, her truth, and most importantly, her evidence. Lisa Monroe, the investigative journalist, Naomi had quietly contacted, published a bombshell expose. Title: Whistleblower Confirms Systemic Racism at Caldwell Motors. Maria Torres was named, photographed, quoted. Inside the article, screenshots of internal emails, memos outlining the customer profiling matrix, testimonies from other showroom staff who, inspired by Maria's courage, anonymously confirmed what Naomi had long suspected. It was all there. Irrefutable. The system. The strategy. The silent discrimination dressed in luxury suits and leather. Chairs. The media storm hit like a freight train. CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post. Every headline now led with the word discrimination. Naomi Caldwell was no longer the subject of scrutiny. She was the one pulling back the curtain, and this time, she moved fast. Within hours, she called an emergency press conference. It was held in the largest hall at Caldwell Motors headquarters. The room packed with journalists, cameras, shareholders, and employees. The air buzzed with anticipation. Naomi walked out, calm, focused, dressed in slate gray, no jewelry, no flash, just gravity. She took the podium. "Good afternoon," she began. "I won't waste your time with pretense." A silence blanketed the room. The cameras zoomed in. For decades, luxury has been sold not just through craftsmanship but through exclusion, gatekeeping, profiling, and for too long, we told ourselves it was about brand image, about efficiency, about protecting an experience. She turned to the massive screen behind her. It lit up. The footage rolled. Her secret shopper visit. Richard Langford's rejection. Michael Reeves's preferential treatment. The comparison was jarring, undeniable. The room collectively shifted in their seats. Then came the leaked memos, the email chains, Maria's recorded testimony. Naomi continued, "This is not a mistake. This is a system. A system that decided who belonged, not by merit, not by money, but by melanin." She paused. "Let the weight of that word settle. We have failed, and I will not let that failure continue under my name." A standing ovation followed. Not everyone stood, but enough did. By evening, every network carried the speech live. Twitter exploded in support. Hashtags trended worldwide. Roar Caldwell Truth. Naomi Caldwell Speaks. Change in Luxury. Celebrities chimed in. Athletes, artists, entrepreneurs who had been quietly dismissed by luxury brands finally spoke up. Stories poured in from around the world. Caldwell Motors wasn't the only offender. It was just the one caught first. Back. In Beverly Hills, Richard Langford sat in his office, glass trembling in his hand. The board had called an emergency meeting. The investors were panicking. His phone rang. "Richard," said Jonathan Fields, his voice taut, "we're voting tomorrow, and it doesn't look good." Richard stood, rage overtaking fear. "You're going to let her destroy everything?" "You destroyed it the moment you got arrogant," Fields replied, then hung up. That night, Richard tried to fight back. He called in favors, pressed allies, even pushed a final smear piece, a last-ditch op-ed claiming Naomi was using race to mask her own poor leadership. But the timing was wrong. The world had already made up its mind. The next morning, Naomi entered the boardroom. The table was lined with the company's power players, some familiar, some new. At the far end sat Richard, suit crisp, face hollow. Jonathan Fields stood. "We all know why we're here," he said. "The question is no longer whether misconduct occurred. The question is what we do about it." Richard stood slowly. "Let me speak," he said. He turned to the room. "Yes, mistakes were made, but this witch hunt, this is about Naomi trying to reshape the company in her image." "And what image is that?" Naomi asked quietly. Richard faltered. Naomi rose. She opened a folder, pulled out a letter. "Before we vote," she said, "I want to read something." She read aloud the original letter from David Williams. "I walked into your showroom ready to invest in excellence," it read. "I walked out feeling invisible." She laid it down. "This isn't politics, this is people, and I won't lead a company that forgets that." The room was silent. Jonathan raised his hand. "All in favor of terminating Richard Langford from Caldwell Motors?" Hands rose, one after another. 11, then 12, 13. Richard stood, frozen. "You can't do this," he whispered. "We already did," Naomi said. Security entered quietly. Richard didn't resist. Outside, cameras waited. But Naomi didn't stop to speak. Her battle wasn't with the press. It was with the future. Hours later, Richard Langford sat alone in his Manhattan penthouse. The television blared headlines. Every ticker bore his name. Disgraced showroom director terminated. Racial bias confirmed at Caldwell Motors. Naomi Caldwell, the woman who changed luxury forever. His phone no longer rang. His contacts ghosted him. Recruiters blacklisted him. One empire, gone. He looked at the empty glass in his hand. No redemption, no comeback, just silence. And Naomi? Naomi was just getting started. The war wasn't over. But the reckoning had begun. The cameras had stopped flashing. The reporters had gone home. The hashtags were slowly falling from the trending list. But inside the headquarters of Caldwell Motors, change was not a headline. It was a mandate. Naomi Caldwell stood at the helm of a company reborn, no longer simply a luxury car empire, but now a battlefield where truth had scorched away old rot and made room for something cleaner, sharper, real. The first wave of reforms rolled out within days of Richard Langford's dismissal. Naomi wasted no time. A sweeping overhaul of hiring practices, mandatory anti-bias training for every employee, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior were written into the company's new code, signed, sealed, and enforceable. Customer service scripts were redesigned from the ground up. Sales incentives were now tied to ethical conduct, not just performance. And at the heart of it all stood Maria Torres. Once an assistant afraid to speak, Maria now wore a badge that read, Head of Equity, Training and Compliance. Naomi had given her more than a title. She gave her a purpose. Maria took the mandate personally. She created modules, organized confidential staff surveys, and began visiting showrooms unannounced. What Richard once buried, Maria now brought to light. I used to think silence was survival, Maria told the staff at her first company-wide broadcast. Now I know. Truth is power. The results were almost immediate. Slowly but surely, sales began to rise again. Customers, especially those who had once felt unseen, began returning, curious and cautiously hopeful. Social media, once a battlefield of bots and smear, became a place of testimony and redemption. A black couple posted about their test drive experience at the newly restructured Beverly Hills showroom. We were treated like royalty, not because of our skin, but because we were customers. That's all we ever wanted. Naomi received hundreds of messages, many from people she didn't know, thanking her not just for cleaning house, but for challenging an entire industry that had long operated in shadowed rooms behind polished glass. She had set a new standard, and she made it public. We're not just rebuilding Caldwell Motors, she declared at an industry summit weeks later. We're redefining what luxury means. Prestige doesn't belong to a race. It belongs to those who earn it. And I challenge every CEO in this room to do better, or get out of the way. The applause had been thunderous. But Naomi didn't smile, because she wasn't doing this for applause. Now the conference lights were long faded, and Naomi stood alone in her corner office overlooking the New York skyline. Her reflection stared back at her through the glass, a woman who had torn down a system brick by brick, not with fury but with strategy, not for revenge. She didn't want revenge. She wanted a reckoning. And this was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed. She reached for it absently, expecting another investor report or internal update. But the screen showed no name. Just a message from an unknown number. You exposed Richard. But he wasn't the only one. Naomi froze. Her pulse didn't spike. Her breath didn't stutter. Instead, she stared at the message like it was a door, and someone had just knocked. She locked the screen and slowly turned back to the city below, because the war wasn't over. It had only changed shape. Would you risk everything for justice? Comment below, and stay tuned for episode 2.